I'm John Cruz, professional bass angler, and you are watching Bass Life Podcast. All right, here we are with another episode of Bass Life Podcast, and I'm here with my buddy, Rick Hawkins. But if you're not familiar with Bass Life, this is only the second episode, and this is a podcast style video to where you want to do something, you want to go to the gym, you want to cut your grass, you want to go to work, drive, you want to do something and listen to people talk about fishing. This is it. This is it. This is Bass Life Podcast. This is what this is all about. And again, welcoming my good friend, Rick Hawkins. Rick is the Hawk. He is born and raised in Roanoke, Virginia. But Rick is my old team tournament partner. We fished a ton of tournaments together, so I know this cat very well. One of the most interesting people you'll ever hear about in all of fishing. Wouldn't you say that, Rick?
Well, thanks for that compliment.
Yeah.
You agree? Well, I've had my days, I'll have to say.
Had days. So he's going to start off a little shy, a little subdued. We're going to open him up with some different questions here. And the first question I want to ask you, let's go all the way back. I don't want to start midstream here. We're going to go all the way back. How did you get into bass fishing? Because you were a really good athlete growing up, and you grew up in Roanoke, the city of Roanoke. So how did you get into bass fishing?
Well, my dad was a strong outdoorsman. He was an engineer on the railroad, and we started out hunting before we started out fishing. We raised rabbit beagles, and that was a big deal for us growing up. That was our job, to take care of the dogs during the day while my dad was working on the railroad.
And just to interrupt you on the railroad situation, what a small world it is. His dad was friends with my grandfather, my mom's dad. They were friends from the railroad. I mean, you talk about a small world. That's just crazy, because my mom was raised in Roanoke, and her dad worked for the railroad and knew your dad, Little Richard.
As a matter of fact, I saw Johnny in diapers. How about that?
So keep going. So you're talking about the rabbit beagles and how y'all kept him up while he's working.
My dad, he was a river fisherman, and he also was a catfisherman. And he would come in off the road, and we would go catfish down at Smith Mountain Lake. It was just filling up at the time. And, we would just bait fish and that sort of thing. And on the river...
This is the Roanoke River that runs right through Salem and Roanoke.
It would be the Maury River and the James.
Okay.
We would wade those rivers, New River.
Okay.
And that's how I started. And he was, I was started really young. I mean, he was carrying me along with him, at 6 and 7 years old, up and down the bank. So I got caught up in it, and then I started fishing a few ponds and started catching a few largemouth bass, and changed. And
how old were you when you started fishing them ponds? Like
10 years, 10, 11.
Yeah.
And there's my childhood buddy, and he's my buddy now. We've won a ton of money together over the years, Jim D. Hart. His father was an avid bass fisherman, and they lived 4 houses from me. And
so Jimmy probably helped get you into the bass side of things.
Well, his daddy gave me my first Bassmasters.
Oh, okay.
And I would go up on cold Sundays when back then you didn't fish that much during the winter, and he would sit and talk, and he'd show me his old baits. I used to watch him clean the fish in the floor, that sort of thing. And then Jimmy and I started fishing together, and our mothers would take us to the city reservoir, drop us off. We would rent a little rowboat, and we'd go fishing.
Which city was this? Carvin's Cove?
Carvin's Cove.
Carvin's Cove.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And that's how we started. And
well, when, so it's just fun and you're having a good time. When did you fish your first bass tournament?
I guess I was 16 years old, 17. And I had done some research.
You were in the middle of playing baseball and football and rocking those things out. When did you have time to do the
I made
tournaments?
time.
In the summertime? Was it a summertime
Yeah,
deal?
it was. They had the tournaments on the weekends, so it was a bass club situation then.
Uh-huh.
So I
There's
went.
no BFLs and Angler's Choice tournaments?
No, nothing like that.
So it was just a bass club back in Henry County?
Henry County, which was the first bass club in the state of Virginia, which also they came along with the Way Board, that very famous bass club.
Yeah.
And you had one in Roanoke Valley, but they weren't so up for the real young guys.
The boys club, more or less.
Right. And so I went down. I just drove down when I was old enough to drive. I drove down to where they met, and I walked right in and introduced myself, and I picked up a few old baits to take with me, just maybe to have some type of discussion. I didn't know what they were going to say. I didn't know if they were going to kick me out. I didn't know. I have a clue. These were the good old boys.
Yeah.
They were a wonderful bunch of people, and they took me right in and took me right under their wing. And in the first year I fished there, I made the 6-man team. So
right out of the gate.
Right out the gate, and like I said, they were all. You could, the way they set it up, you could pick your time during the month when you wanted to fish, because we had the wayboard situation, and it allowed me to fish around sports, and that was the perfect setup for me. And it was the perfect bunch of guys, very knowledgeable. I learned a whole lot at the age 16.
So then let's keep going through. You played collegiate sports, and then when did you start to get more serious about fishing the regional type tournaments? At that point, was it when you started working for Double Envelope here in Roanoke, or when was that?
Well,
you
actually,
really got serious about it.
At about 18, we got where we could fish pretty good lick, and I'm talking about Jimmy and I both, and so we decided we were going to try it out. Well, that was my first year of school, and my dad found an old Ranger, and it was a friend that had worked on the railroad with him, and he needed money, and so it was a 185A, 175A Ranger with an 85 horsepower Johnson on the back, and our agreement was I had to do my jobs and work and do whatever, and he would go ahead and get the boat for me. So I had the access to the boat. So Jimmy and I took advantage of it. The second tournament we fished, we won.
Where was that?
That was on Smith Mountain.
Smith Mountain?
It was cold.
Wintertime deal?
Cold, yes. And we actually doubled the field.
Dang. So, one sidebar, how'd y'all catch them in that tournament? I know you know.
Can't tell you. Just kidding.
I know you
actually,
know.
On a jig and a grub.
Jig and a grub back in the wintertime.
Yeah, and we found the fish loaded up in deep creek channels. Similar to Carbon's Cove, where we'd honed our skills.
Right.
We just took the same thing and went to Smith Mountain.
Applied it there.
We didn't really know that much about Smith Mountain, all the little.
There weren't a bunch of houses and stuff.
No, back then it wasn't. No docks,
It was just all wooded banks for the most part, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's when we realized we could fish. Well, Jimmy, he went on with raising a family. I went to college.
Yep.
Okay, and in college, I kept trying to compete when I could. I was fishing a whole lot since I had access to the boat. I went to Ferrum College, and I played baseball at Ferrum, and I was like 20 minutes from the boat ramp, maybe, and I would get on Philpott Lake, which is in Henry County, and I got to fish that lake quite a bit. As I got older, my competition, I got better. Just, I took the athleticism similar to you, because I watched you grow up.
Yeah, you take that competitive itch that you get to scratch by playing baseball or whatever sport, and then when you're not playing that, you still got that itch and you got to scratch it. And that, for me, that's where the bass fishing came in, and the tournaments. I turned all my energy and focus into the bass tournaments, which it sounds like you did the same thing when you were kind of done with the baseball, right?
Exactly. was just like you when you started with me. You were 14 or 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you jumped in the boat.
Met Rick when I was 15 years old. And the extent of my experience was going to Santee Cooper once and Okeechobee a couple of times, and then a bunch of ponds. That was the extent of my experience. So I could pond fish, but this whole reservoir thing was foreign to me. And it was about the time I met Rick when I was 15, and he taught me a lot. But this is more about you, not me. So I just want to. When did you really get to rocking the regional tournaments? Because if you don't know, I know I've had a number of people tell me that fished against you back then. I was too young. They fished against you back then and said when Rick Hawkins showed up for a tournament, they knew he was going to finish in the top 5. And it was like a given. And it didn't matter. They said it didn't matter. And this comes from most directly from Frank Poyer, who was a great fisherman in his own right. He said when you showed up to a tournament, it didn't matter if it was a Chowan River, James River, Bugs Island, Smith Mountain, Lake Anna, Potomac River. He said whatever it was that y'all were fishing, you by yourself or you and Jimmy were going to be in the top 5 or 10. He's like, it's just a given. So tell us about when that was happening.
Well, basically, when I got out of high school and went into college, when college ended, I got a job with Double Envelope Corporation
in Roanoke.
In Roanoke, and I was the first unmarried salesman they'd ever hired. They sent me to Tidewater. Well, I went down to Tidewater and took the boat and started competing down there. And I fished what was called the Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland Pro Circuit. Mm-hmm. Did real well in it, Angler of the Year, et cetera, et cetera. And we fished all the tidal waters, and we fished Kerr, and we also fished Gaston. So while I was working, and I was in my early 20s, and there again, I could feel that I was getting better. Mm-hmm. The confidence was growing. I was getting a lot of press. I was still getting press locally in Roanoke, mm-hmm. along with the Tidewater, Virginia Beach Tidewater area, and I got married, and I married a former Miss Virginia. She was an actress. She mm-hmm. moved to Los Angeles.
Yeah, well, she wanted to pursue her acting career,
right,
and singing, whatever else, and she had some pretty decent roles. I mean, I remember I've seen her on Full House in those episodes, so it wasn't, my opinion, wasn't a failed attempt at doing that. But
she did a great job.
You being a good husband, you moved with her. Didn't matter what was going on. You just moved out there. So you went west.
Well, I was already in discussion with Ranger about
mm-hmm.
Maybe taking a chance and hitting the circuit.
Yeah.
And I felt at that point I was confident enough that I felt I could do it. And then when she decided to move that way, it was like, whoa, let me reload here and see what I'm going to do. So I followed her out there. I drove across the coast. It was snowing. It took me like a week. I was stuck in Texas on this trip. Well, I lost my boat and my truck. That's how much it snowed. That's how high the drift was.
Dang.
And I had it full of all my tackle and everything. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew there was a skeeter dealership below Castaic Lake. So
in California.
In California. So I called them when I was at Lake Havasu. I'd always heard about Lake Havasu because of the Red Man All-Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, I'll just stop at Lake Havasu and see what it looks like. And that's when I called them. They said, we'll just bring it over and we'll put it in the lot. They didn't know me from Adam, had no clue who
mm-hmm.
I was. And in the meantime, I knew that Ranger had a big dealership out there, North Hollywood Marine. And it was the #1 dealership in the West. And so my goal was to get to Ranger out there. Mm-hmm. And the nice folks there at the skeeter dealership, They let me keep my boat there for a couple months until I had everything together. All my stuff moved, and I was ready to go fishing. So I walked into North Hollywood Marine. There again, just walked in, no invite.
Yeah.
And introduced myself and threw out a resume on the table. And I met Gary Marshall, and he became like my second father. And he took me under. He introduced me to Don Lee. This is Don Lee and Associates, handled all the Ranger sales. Next thing you know, I was in. And but of course I had to go fishing.
Yeah, so you were fishing and selling Ranger boats.
Right, I had an office there, and I kept all my tackle, and I had it perfect. Office there, I had a pit crew. I was lucky enough to come right in the first year and just qualify for everything, and never seen any of these lakes before.
Just fishing them the way you fished.
Right, and they had cutoffs, so I'd drive around. I'd take a day or two and drive around the lake to see what I could see from the bank, and that's how I started out there.
But just to let you know what a salesman this guy really is, while he's working for North Hollywood Marine, here comes a woman and her son into the dealership, and you ended up selling Aaron Martin's, who was about 15 or 16 at the time.
Right.
Aaron Martin's mother, Carol, you sold them their very first bass boat, and it was something that Aaron wanted to do because Aaron liked to fish, and he fished kind of like you off the bank and the rivers and all the small bodies of water, and he wanted to fish the bigger bodies of water. So he talked his mom into getting a bass boat, and sure enough, they walk in, and who ends up selling them the boat? Rick Hawkins.
Well, what happened was I was sitting up on the front deck. I had cowboy boots on. I had blonde hair down to here. I was just a wild fishing cowboy, and I wasn't from California, so I was a totally different personality. Of course, I talked different, and I was flipping a jig into a coffee can. I had 3 coffee cans sitting out in front of the boat, and I was pitching off the front deck and hitting them coffee cans while I was sitting there waiting for, wasting time, waiting for somebody to come in. And they walked in, and I met them. Aaron at the time was working at a tackle shop there, a really, really good tackle shop. Mm-hmm. And they lived right under Castaic Lake, which was great for them. So I took them, they bought the boat at the San Diego Fred Hall show. And it was a 363 Ranger, I remember. It was black, it was a beautiful boat.
And they didn't exactly know how to back it down the boat ramp, right?
No, they didn't know anything about anything, really. So
you took them.
I took them to Lake Piru, which is another little lake there. And we put the boat in the water. I had to show them how to back it in and out. That was a fun day. It took us most of the day to get through all that. And we went out and fished for a little while, but they were, they were truly, total, 100% rookie about it.
Yeah. And just so y'all know, a number of years back, I actually caught up with Carol, Aaron's mom, and asked her about Rick and got her to retell the story. You tell it with a few more details because she had a different perspective. But just when I mentioned your name and talk about backing the boat down, she just started laughing, and she said, "Yeah, we did not know anything. We didn't have a clue what we were doing." And she said she was so thankful for you, and she said, "Oh my God, he had the best patience." She said, "I bet he thought we were just total idiots because we didn't even know how to back the boat down, but he was just really patient and took everything." So just such a small world. It's kind of interesting how that stuff comes around. But so you got to see Aaron when he was little Aaron, and go, and then that's but that's not the only person that has gone on to have a big time career in bass fishing that you ran across and you were friends with. I mean, you traveled and you had with campground mates, I guess you'd call it, with Jay Ellis, and I just remember one story you told me about one of y'all having a ball break on your trailer.
Yeah, well, you had I was still young then, so you had your young warriors, so to speak, out there, and the guys to beat was the young guys to beat was John Murray, of course Jay Ellis. You had several guys up north that were very good too.
Glebe and
Glebe, that's the older guys.
Yeah,
so,
older.
Yeah, but I'm talking about
the younger guys,
the young bucks
at the time there. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jay and I would go practice before these tournaments. We were putting our time in. I could tell he was as serious as me. He was the one I saw. This guy as serious as I am about this. So we would go 2 weeks out sometimes, or before the cutoffs. Everything had a cutoff, and we would fish these lakes. I mean, in hideous weather sometimes, and we'd always end up staying in the same campground, or we'd find the cheapest motels. Some of the horrible motels, but
cockroach inns.
Yeah, terrible.
Been
but
there.
just anywhere to stay and lay our head, and we would fish. And Jay and I, in that division, when we're fishing in the South, I always knew I had to wait to see when I was weighing. I had to wait to see what he was going to weigh too, because I know he was going to be right there with me. Same with John Murray.
Yeah, Murray. I think it's hard to argue. I don't know if anybody has won more boats than Murray out west. I think he's. It's. I mean, there's been Glebe is possibly, but Murray's. It's ridiculous how many he's won. But tell us that ball story.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got off.
I want to hear. Oh, it's too good. So where were y'all going?
Where are you going to? The Red Man had a tournament on Yuma, out in Yuma, Arizona, and on Lake Martinez. Well, I'd never heard of Lake Martinez. I knew it was below Havasu. I thought it was just down the creek. So I left one night driving, and I usually like to drive out west after dark because of the heat. And that driven on, and I thought I would never get to this place. I mean, forever. It ended up like an 11-hour drive.
God.
And it was starting to get light, and I'm almost to the ramp. I'm like a mile and a half from the ramp, and there's only one road into this ramp. It's a beautiful place in the desert, honestly. And all of a sudden, I heard something loud, and I looked behind me, and the front of my boat is coming in through the back of the truck of my Blazer, and I'd broken the ball on my trailer. Well, we know that people, and I'm down at the bottom of the swag. We know people are going to be coming over that hill, and it's dark.
Right.
So I had a guy with me, and we got the boat out of the road, and I didn't know what to do, so I drove down to the boat ramp, and the only way to get it out there was to get another ball. But everything was demolished. I mean, it was hard to drive. The brakes were shot, etc. And so I saw Jay's van sitting there with his boat behind it, which is not right.
Right.
So I went over there and knocked on the door. Jay comes to the door. He said, "What's up, Rick?" And I went, "I've broken the ball on my truck." I said, "I'm afraid somebody's going to hit the North Hollywood Marine Ranger, right? Or that Mercury I had, that hot Mercury sticking out in the back of the road." And he said, "I believe I got one." Well, he has the flu. I'm talking about he is sick as a dog. And so he gets out and gives me the ball, and I make it back and get there to practice. And in the tournament, guess who was first and second? Jay was first, and I was
Rick
second.
was second. So that goes to show, I mean, even back then, what a nice guy Jay was, and then also just another awesome story. But yeah, I mean, fishing out west, I mean, you ran around a lot with Byron Velvick.
Yes.
You know, when I mentioned your name years ago to Byron just lit up. He's like, "Oh my God, the Hawk!" And then, you know, same thing with Mike O'Shea. Mike O'Shea is not as well known because he didn't come east and fish, but very good Western fisherman.
Great
you
guy.
were boys with all the boys over in the West Coast at the time, which was a happening scene.
What was really funny, about all this is here I am. I don't know anybody when I first go out there, and these guys, you know, they took me right in. I guess it was because we were competing so hard. I guess you respect your competition.
Yeah, it's a fraternity.
And back then it was a bit different because you had competition in boats. If you were with the champion boys, you didn't hang out with the Ranger boys. If you were the Skeeter boys, you didn't hang out with the Ranger. You know, that's just the way it worked.
Cliquish, like
I wasn't like that whatsoever. I was going to hang out with whoever I wanted to hang out with. And that's the way it was. Well, it just so happened, Byron and O'Shea, they were, and Jay, they're Skeeter guys. Well, O'Shea I hung out with him a lot locally in Los Angeles on the local lakes. We fished several tournaments. What a fine fisherman, excellent. He didn't have a chance to really go out on a big circuit, but he would have been right at home.
He would have done fine. He did it for a year or two, but he wasn't fully committed to it. But he at least did it long enough for me to get to know him a little bit, and a neat guy.
Great sense of humor.
Oh, funny. Yeah, I love his laugh too.
So we had some great times, and I think that that made it such a bunch easier for me.
Yeah.
The Velvet thing, that's a great story too. He was just a kid, and I'm talking about a kid wet behind the ears.
'Cause he's younger than you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, by a good bit.
A good bit, and just like you.
Yeah, he was young at the time. Yeah.
So, anyhow, I saw him where he came in. He won a bed tournament, fishing tournament. I didn't know who he was from Adam. I'd never seen him before.
Yeah,
he just walked right in, and won one. And so I got to know him and his personality and everything. And he's pretty wide open like me too, you know. And he was younger.
Yeah.
So he would try to find out where we were going to stay. You know, what motels or. So he wanted to be.
Around. Yeah.
He knew that if he was staying where these lakes are huge.
Yeah.
So if we're staying at a certain place, it's usually a reason for that. That'd be called fish.
Right.
You know, that's called fishies. So we let him tag along, and he was just a lot of fun. He was like the real young kid on the block.
Yeah.
But he was always pleasant, always a gentleman.
Yeah. He's fun. I mean, carved out a good career and all that, but how many? I tell you, we go back to Havasu. You mentioned Lake Havasu. I remember one story that you told me about catching fish at Lake Havasu off of a rock in the middle of Party Cove in the summertime while they're partying, and you caught them deep cranking, right?
Right.
Now, you were deep cranking. Throwing deep crankbait before you got out west from your time here, and then you took that was one of the techniques you took out there. We'll talk more about deep cranking in a minute, but I want to hear that Havasu story.
Well, Lake Havasu's, the Party Cove has been all over TV, YouTube. I mean, it's just been everywhere. It's just a famous place where all the college kids go, and basically half of them get naked, whatever. And they just have a big time partying, and they just cut loose. Well, right in the middle of the cove is this rock, and I found
like a
this
big boulder
kind
of deal?
Yeah, it was come up to about 16, 17 foot underwater. And this whole canyon is a steep canyon, and that's why all the houseboats can get in the canyon and tie up. And when the kids jump off the boats, they don't hurt themselves. Plenty of water. Well, you know, nobody knows that rock's out there, but basically me. Maybe, and probably Jay Yellis. Yeah. And anyway, I'd caught some fish on it before. I had to have one fish, and it was in the afternoon, and I knew I was right there close to either winning or
top five.
Top fives, mainly top fives. For some reason, I always had a hard time winning, but I didn't have a hard time finding the top five. That's just the way my career has been. Anyway, I pulled in there and I told the guy with me, I said, we're going to have to weave in all these boats. I said, just bear with me. And we weaved through the boats. And there was an opening, and there was nobody sitting over there. Out of the whole place, it was perfect. Well, I told the guy when I said, let me see if I can hit this rock. So I threw the crankbait over to
What
past the
crankbait
rock.
were you throwing?
I was throwing a 400 series
Pose. Okay.
and I was throwing a white one.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Spook.
Mm-hmm.
And I hit the rock. The fish hit the bait. It was about a good solid 3 to 3.5 pounder. The fish I needed. Fish jumped straight up in the air in the middle of all these boats. And all of a sudden, all these women stand up with no tops on. My partner about died.
A heart attack.
I was trying to get him to get the net. He was ignoring me totally. So
Slightly
finally,
distracted.
I just slung the fish in. And to this day, he was still staring. I can't believe all this. Well, the girls were cheering. They got jet skis in there. They're driving up.
And he's
to the
cheering
boat.
at them cheering.
Yeah. Oh, it was something. Anyway, the girls come over in the jet skis and looked at the fish, and it was quite something. I had a hard time getting. I had a lot easier time getting in than I did getting out. Number one, my partner didn't want to leave.
Oh my gosh, that's too awesome. And then all right. So how many years did you stay out west?
I was out west about 9 years total, 8 or 9.
You made a lot of friends, caught a lot of fish.
Yeah.
Had a lot of fun. At the end of your tenure out west, you and your wife had Langley, right?
Yes.
And then you both decided to come back east.
Well, actually, I decided to come on back. Hollywood's rough on a marriage, and
yeah, I mean, just being away from home, and just y'all two out there both trying to do your thing. It ended up not working out marriage-wise.
Right. So
But
I knew I had my son there and to raise, and I was fishing really good. I hadn't finished all the tournaments, but I was qualified for the Classic at that time. Might have been my first Bassmasters Classic, which I always wanted to make, and I was sitting on the North Hollywood Marine team. I was their highest ranked angler on all the circuits at the time. Mm-hmm. So I was really in the groove. I was fishing as good as I've ever fished in my life. But I had to make a decision at that standpoint. North Hollywood Marine, they gave me we had 2 boats back then, or if you were fishing the big circuit and the west circuit. The west was unlimited horsepower. I had the fastest, baddest boat in the west from Gary Marshall. Mm-hmm. Then Ranger gave me the 150 horsepower limit boat for BASS. Mm-hmm. That come out of flipping. So I was sitting there with 2 boats, and things got bad, and I said, well, I'm just going to have to get my son out of here. So it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had, Gary Marshall and Don Lee had taken me under their wing, and I was kind of their young little guy that they kind of let in there,
right.
and
protege,
yeah, helped me, push me to the level I needed to be. Thank the Lord for them, and I had to just stop fishing at the age of 32 years old.
Mm-hmm. Right in your,
in my prime. So I got Gary took the boat back he took that boat back in, and that was kind of a famous boat because I could outrun. I mean, I made. I will have to say I made the boat famous.
Right.
Because it was so fast, and I was crazy, and I used to do the boat test for Western Outdoor News for Ranger and Mercury.
Yeah.
And so I would drive them to see if I could break them.
Yeah.
Couldn't break them.
No. Back then that was the gold standard at the time.
Yeah,
there was no better made boat.
Well, that was when Ranger was Ranger. Everything's different now.
Everything's evolved, and I mean a lot of people, I think, could definitely relate to that situation, to where you got to put family first, and your career has to go back burner or whatever, and it has to become family, and I don't think anybody ever regrets those decisions. But when you came back, I'm glad you came back.
Yeah.
because that's not long after, wasn't too far long after you got back that we met. You've been back a little bit, and we met, and you were the one that taught me how to deep crank. And you'd obviously been doing it a long time. And I asked you what bait you were throwing because you were the one that turned me on to the Pose 400s back in the day. And as being a deep crank connoisseur, seeing how it was originally the Bagley's DB3 was the first deep crankbait, right?
Right.
And then the Pose was really kind of modeled after that.
Well,
right. I mean, by and large.
Well, you had, Rebel had a deep WR.
Don't grab your mic.
Thank you, sir.
See, this is what happens on a podcast. He starts fiddling with his mic. I'm trying to help you out with the audio, so don't fiddle with your mic.
Yes, sir. Rookie over here. Anyway, we get back to the
DB3.
The DB3. Rebel had some deeper crankbaits.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think probably the DB3 was the first plug that went to the other level of cranking, because you could weight the plug, and then you could thank the Carolina fishermen for that.
The Fritz. Yeah.
Right. So if you look at this whole picture, when I left to go to California, I was fishing against David and David Wright.
Right.
And Coble and all the good Carolina fishermen.
Yep.
All right. Well, I caught on to the deal. And they wouldn't tell you. You had to learn it on your own. But I figured it out.
There was no YouTube to
figure any of this example,
stuff out.
Jimmy, my partner, we won they had Tuesday night tournaments starting in the spring all the way through the summer. The first year they had those, drawing a lot of boats for that sort of thing, 50 and 60 boats. I remember David's daddy, James.
Yep. There's David Dudley.
Yes, David Dudley. Anyway, James kept, they said, we're just going fishing for second, because Jimmy and I won 13 out of 14, and we were catching them on the crankbait. Nobody could figure it out how or whatever. So when I left, I'm not going to say I mastered it, but I had it down pretty good.
At the time, you had an advanced degree, and most everybody else didn't have a clue what they were doing. And still, deep cranking is one of your go-to techniques. But so that's why I was gonna just get you to go. You've done it for a long, long time. You've caught thousands of fish on this technique. Go through what length rod do you like to use? You like to use a longer 7.5 to 8 foot, or do you more like 7.3 on your deep crank?
Well, as far as rod choice goes, it's kind of what I'm going to say is probably going to be opposite of what you've read. When I'm cranking in less than 10 foot of water, usually, I'm using a fiberglass rod or a glass rod or a glass composite rod. When I'm
really slow taper,
gives with the fish, etc. When I am cranking deeper than 10 or 12 foot, I use a graphite rod, and I use rods from 7.3 all the way to almost 8 foot, and
depending on the plug, I guess.
Yeah, depending on the size of the plug, how much distance I need. Of course, the length and the distance has a lot to do with each other.
Do you do the graphite on the deep crank for feel, or for casting distance, or both?
For both.
Both.
But I would say feel takes priority over that.
And you still have a preference with the old school Lew's speed spool, right?
Right. I use BB1ENGs.
Originals. Not the new.
Big handles.
Not the new stuff.
Right.
The originals. And
I've got, I guess I've got 14 that have just been cleaned and ready. Because when I use them, they've gotten so old and everything. My whole side of my pants will be burnt, will be black because the grease comes out. So I have to get them re-greased every year and get them. They're the same ones. Yeah. They squeak, they moan, they cry, they wonder why I keep putting them through it.
With they zing.
Man, they zing
it out
and
there.
them guys with these new reels, they come on out there and a few have tried to see if they can outcast me, but usually
Outcast the hawk.
Well, most of the time, no. On occasion, somebody.
But you have progressed to using fluorocarbon, right?
Yeah. There again, I'm gonna go back to it's how I do it. Is if I'm fishing from square bills to DT6s to like your plug,
Little John's,
the Little John, the mid one that is so
MD,
good.
Yeah.
I use monofilament.
It's for the stretch.
And once I get to the bigger plug, I want the feel. I don't want the feel so much with the
shallow plug.
I want the fish to be able to load up on the bait. Lots of times people are too aggressive with it. They miss a lot of fish because they don't give the fish a chance.
I agree with that. I explain to people a lot of times in seminars that when that shallow crankbait is going through the water or deep, that fish doesn't pin it down, put a knife and fork on it, cut it up and eat it. They vacuum suck it in.
Right.
And when they vacuum suck that crankbait in, if your rod's too stiff, your line's too stiff, all that, it's only going to suck it a little ways and then it's going to catch. And then it's going to get it on the lips of their mouth. If you got a little more give, you're going to let that crankbait get sucked all the way in their mouth and then you hook them up.
Well, yeah.
So you do fluorocarbon on the deeper stuff.
Yeah, and there again, I keep it simple. I rarely crank with. When I crank, I crank into some nasty stuff usually. So I'm almost scared to. On occasion, I'll go with a 10-pound fluorocarbon, but I mainly stay with the 12-pound fluorocarbon, and if I have to on the real big plugs, I'll go to a 14 or 15, depending on the manufacturer of the line.
Yeah.
But I want the fluorocarbon for the feel. Speaking of line, I'll tell you a little trick here. Line's so expensive. When you're crankbait fishing, people lose a lot of fish on crankbaits. They break a lot of plugs off, etc. I have my reel set where I use a football field, and I have it marked off, an old football field in the middle of Roanoke where I played, and I'll go take 100 yards off, and I'll use junk line to begin with to get the backup. Then I'll take 100 yards off, and then I'll take a new spool. And I mainly crank with a Stren Fluorocast. That's what I normally use.
You've been using it for
forever, and whatever they say about it, don't believe them because it works. Because I've got fish out of the middle of stuff you'd never imagine. So I take that. It's 200 yards on a spool. They don't have bulk spools. So when I get to that knot, I know that's 100 yards. Now the reason I'm saying that is because people don't retie enough when they crankbait fish. Like for up north, this is a great example. Oneida, mussels. They're everywhere.
Mussels are awful. Yeah.
All right, up there, I was catching fish on a deep crankbait, which is nobody does because of the zebra mussels. I had to retie like every 5 or 6 casts. Well, when you start wearing that line down, you start losing distance, etc. So at the end of the day, you have to replace that line. Really quick to replace. Or say something goes wrong with the line, you can just pull it right off and get it right back on there, and you don't lose any time.
Because you know how much is on there.
Right.
Exactly.
That's one of my little tips there.
Little tricks. Yeah. It's just have a system. It's thinking about things that other people just usually don't think about. But let's get into hooks. You fished a bunch of different style hooks. What is your system as far as EWGs, round bends, Gamakatsu, owner? Where are you on that spectrum?
Pretty simple again. If I'm fishing deep, deeper than 10 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
For example, let's use a DT10. I'm going to use Gamakatsu bronze round bend hooks. They're the sharpest.
Nothing sharper, yep.
They're the sharpest, and I'll have several on standby. So when I am, in the mess, or if I've caught 2 or 3, good solid fish, I will switch those hooks immediately.
Yeah,
so,
you're in the heat of battle. You're not going to sit there and try to hone them down. You're just going to pop them off, throw them in the trash, and put your new one on.
So that's 2 things right there. Retie, pull some of that line off.
Yep.
Change those hooks.
Keep them sticky sharp.
Right, and also the split ring is important as the hook, because if you're changing hooks over and over, you need a good split ring.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's not going to bend out and
I
stay.
use the Owner Hyper split rings.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And that's when I use them, because I'm going to put so many hooks on them.
Yep. They need to be able to close back.
Close back hard.
Right. And that's awesome. What do you see, like when you have co-anglers fishing with you and they pull out the same, let's say, you're throwing a DT10 and they pull out the same color DT10. My guess is 9 times out of 10 you're going to smoke them on it because you know what you're fishing, but there's usually something else that they don't do that you do that catches more fish. What give me an example of what I know for me what I see when I'm fishing next to people. What do you see?
You talking about using the same bait as me?
Well, like all things basically equal, you're going to outfish the person fishing next to you or behind you. Not because you're hitting stuff first. There's something else to why you're catching more fish. What do you give me an example of that?
Well, the main example and the secret to the whole thing is the lineup.
To hit the cover.
To hit the cover. If you can't hit the cover properly, you're not going to catch the fish. That's the disadvantage for the guy in the back. That's why I tell the guy in the back to pick up a Carolina rig or something like that, because he is not going to be able to hit that spot. Now he might get, it happens all the time. People catching behind me all the time. People want a lot of money behind me, but 9 times out of 10 on a crankbait bite, a deep bite, that ain't gonna happen because he does not have the angle. And
deep cranking is all about the angles.
It's all about the angle.
That's a huge part of it. And what it is being able to hit that piece of cover where the fish is set up to eat. Because to me, that's what's happening when you're deep cranking. You taught me that. Those fish are going to be set up on something hard because that's like their dinner plate.
Right.
That's like their dinner plate. That's where they're going to eat because they're going to have something hard. They're going to be waiting there on that hard piece of bottom, log, rock, whatever, because when something goes down there, they can pin it and easily catch it. Versus if they sit on a mud bottom, a shad jumps down there and they ram it down into the mud, they can't get it. It's going to make a big dust cloud. They can't eat it. So that's one reason. And I remember that from when we fished together, and that's held true most everywhere I've gone. But if you don't have that lineup, you can't hit that. You can't hit that spot.
Exactly. The closest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
You can find, you've got your point here. You need to find the other point and make the straight cast to hit the contact point.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like, that's pretty simple. It's not simple.
No.
Not when you're out there and sometimes you have 2 miles of lake in front of you and there's nothing to mark or anything.
And I feel like that as far as deep cranking goes, the GPS and waypoints are not accurate enough.
No, they're not.
To hit right what you need to hit. Now, I do tell you what has made it very helpful are the Ultrex with the spot lock, and now all the other trolling motors have the same feature. That has made a big improvement in being able to stay exactly on your precise cast on an offshore deep crank deal. It has helped, I think, But even at that, you can have the wind shift. If you're not paying attention, even with that, if you're not paying attention, you got to throw right to that little tiny tree on the bank over there. If you throw 10 feet to the left, you're going to miss it. But if you don't realize the direction that you just made that cast, even if you're spot locked or anchored or whatever you want to call it, if you're not, don't have that line up, you ain't going to hit it again.
Right, and that's why I use the rod I use, and so I can feel, and the line I use, so I can feel if I've hit the spot right or not. I can actually tell, was I in where I was before?
Yeah, you can tell if it's gravel, you can tell if it's red clay, or if it's boulder or stumps, brush. You can feel it all.
Did I feel that bait crawl over that piece of structure twice? And you know, that's kind of a way you can check yourself if you get thrown off a little bit.
And it's funny. Me and Iaconelli talk about it, and we talked about it years ago. When you get dialed in with the deep cranking, you can tell basically before you get bit. You know when you're getting ready to get bit. You can feel it coming. You're like, wait, here it is. It's coming up. Boom, you hit the cover, and then there he is. It's a feel thing, and there's no other way to explain it, in my opinion.
Right. It's contact and it's feel. You know, it's all, you know, you've got to have it all coordinated together. There are other things too. You know, the current. If you have a lake with a current, current is your best friend.
Yeah.
It's going to put the fish where you want to put it. So sometimes without that current, the contact point may change because the fish is going to move on differently on the structure. So, you know, you have to take that in mind too. There again, you come back down to the main thing of this feel. You got to be able to feel down there. And like you said, when you feel it, you can almost feel it. You're getting ready to get hit.
Getting ready to happen.
Right.
Boom.
And then once you get in a little bit of groove, you know, I mean, a tournament I fished last year, I don't know how many hundreds of casts I made. I got 5 bites, actually 6. I got the whole entire day. Did I get that feeling?
Like it's getting ready to go down.
So it's a monotonous thing. They used to call me the machine. I got an article that I saved, one of the few I saved from out west. And the reason they called me the machine was, number one, of course, the safety things have changed since. I'd cut my engine off on that Mercury, and I'd be on that front deck making that cast by the time it's set up, to make sure that I got another cast. Then the next important thing I'm going to tell you about crankbait fishing is volume.
The more casts, the more chances you got of getting bit.
Right. More places, run and gun. You know, I see a lot of these guys now, they think these guys run and gun. Well,
right.
You know, when you had unlimited horsepower on your boat and you could get up without the kill switch on, that's when you could really run and gun it. So
you watch Brian Thrift and you're like, I've seen this play before.
Yeah.
I know how this works.
Yeah, I haven't. You know, I've never got a chance to talk to Brian Thrift, but I hopefully I will one day, and I just want to let him know that he's going to feel real bad when he gets older.
You're speaking from experience.
Speaking from experience.
That's funny. That's funny. But speaking of cranking, for the last, not this year, but the last couple of years before that, you fished the Bassmaster Opens, and you had what happens to a lot of really good fishermen, had some real good seasons, but like one event where you like semi-stub your toe keeps you in the 30s, 40s. The one year you finished, 14th? 11th, but you were only like 14 points out of being in the elites.
Right.
So, I mean, you were one fish here or there, especially in that one event. I think, was it at one of the events you stubbed your toe a little bit, and that's what ended up costing you making the elites. Was one of those events. But anyway,
That's the James River one.
I think it was maybe the James.
When the fish come off.
The fish come.
Yeah.
But either way, you're right there, and your plan is to fish the opens, and that's what is that. So what's your next goal from a fishing perspective?
Well, I've got my little bucket list. I'm 62 years old now, and the bucket list includes you and Ed Lochran.
Yeah.
Both of y'all.
And also Ed Lochran, who qualified for the Bassmaster Classic this year, his first classic. We are both super pumped because this guy is the one that introduced Ed to fishing on the public waters, right? I mean, he's friends with Kramer and stuff. That really got him into it. But then you were instrumental in the tournament side and really dialing him in there. And Ed's been doing it for a long time, and just finally qualified for the elites last year, and in his second season qualified for the Bassmaster Classic. But you introduced me to Ed when I was 15. Not long after I met you, you introduced me to Ed, who you had already known for a handful of years.
Well, I basically, got you guys out there and got you going, showed you the real side of tournament fishing, time management, et cetera. I could keep going. Yeah,
all those little tips, like that line trick. Rick taught me all kind of tricks like that. You taught me the definition of what fishing from sun up to sundown is in the summer when the days are the longest, and you got to be out there for 14 hours because we're not gonna get beat by somebody that fished more than we did, practiced more than we did.
Exactly right.
Happen. It's not going to happen. And
first out, last in.
I've carried that mentality ever since then. I mean, you instilled that in me, and going to the store, planning out your meals for the whole week. You taught me that before I even got to fishing on the road. You taught me how to do that on the local level, and that's carried on. That kind of stuff has been big for me that you've taught me. But I didn't mean to jump off your your bucket list, so to speak.
Well, the bucket list is I slipped. You guys taught me into coming back and fishing, see if I could make the classic or make the classic or make the elites. And the first year I did it, I finished 11th, and unfortunately I had just a crazy issue happen, and I just missed it by just a few points. But right now my plan is to go back out there, get at it, see if I can qualify for the Elite Series or win one and being able to go to the Bassmaster Classic. Because when I had to quit, I thought I had the chance to go to the Bassmasters Classic. And I wouldn't give that up for anything. I love my son, and he's a fine man, and I did the right thing. But I'd like to go on and at least make one Bassmasters Classic. But I'd like to fish the Elite Series, and putting it all together, the beauty would be to be able to fish the Bassmasters Classic against the two young men that I had a lot to do with forming their careers growing up, and the two men that I'm very, very proud of right now, Johnny and Ed, two fine men, two great fishermen, and I'm lucky to have been a part of their lives.
Hell yeah, that would be the ultimate, is to have Rick and Ed and myself in the Classic all at the same time would be the icing.
I might just retire after
the icing right there.
Honestly.
So hopefully that'll happen here in the next couple of years. And you know what? Stranger things have happened.
It's going to happen, I think.
Stranger things have happened. So, but anyway, Rick, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come out here and be on the Bass Life podcast. And you're my first actual human guest, because the last one we had Elf on the Shelf, and he didn't talk, and you talked way more than Elf on the Shelf. So I'm glad that you're able to help with having a conversation with somebody else, and it flows much better. So I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on. And you want me to have a little talk with the Elf on the Shelf? I can fix him.
No, he's okay. He's up there watching. Why is he? He's looking right at me. But either way, I appreciate everybody watching. If you want to see, you have any questions for Rick specifically, or any comments directed towards him, drop them down there in the comments. We want to hear about it. If Rick doesn't see them, I will let him know. If you have a message for him or a question for him, I will make up the answer and put it down there below, or I'll actually ask Rick and then just put the answer down. Either one. We'll do one or the other. But anyway, again, I appreciate everybody watching, and I look forward to seeing y'all on the next one.
Thank you.